Hey, it's Tripp from TrippAdvice.com. Holy shit, it is cold out. Now, do I have your attention? I hope I do, because today I'm going to be teaching you how to keep a girl's attention. Now, I know you're probably like, what do I say to girls? How am I supposed to have conversation with them? How do I continue a conversation? Well, the best way to do that is through story. Yes, you have stories, but you need to learn how to tell your stories. And through this video, and I know it's a little bit longer than some of my other ones, but really bear with me and go through this whole video because I'm going to be teaching you my story formula. That's right, there is a formula to be able to tell a story, and it's super simple. It's a 3-step process, and once you learn this, you're going to be able to tell any story of yours and make it sound amazing and capture her attention. So check it out. So storytelling is inevitably going to be coming up in all of your interactions. It comes up not only when you meet women, but when you're networking, when you're talking to friends, when you're talking to family, when you're talking to strangers. Anyone you're talking to, you're going to be somewhat telling them your story, or maybe telling them something that happened, telling them about something in your life that you've done or that you want to do, right? These are like the things that come up in the meat of conversation. The stories of our lives, the stories that we tell ourselves. And so this week, I'm going to be teaching you how to tell a story. So the first thing is the attention grabber. So this is something that is going to grab their attention, right? This is something that's going to get them being like, whoa, this guy is about to say something really interesting. An attention grabber might be like, you would never believe what happened to me the other day. Right? Something as simple as that. That's a really good attention grabber, because the way I'm saying it to you and the words, it's like, whoa, he's got something interesting to say right now, you know? So it's like, you would not believe what happened to me the other day, okay? So that's one example of an attention grabber. Another example of an attention grabber might be asking them a question that's rhetorical, meaning you're asking them a question that's not meant for them to answer. Instead, you are going to be the one answering the question, okay? So an example of that might be, what is the weirdest place that you've ever traveled to? So you'll be talking to them and say, hey, what's the weirdest place you've ever traveled to? The weirdest place I ever traveled to, and then you're going to answer the question. And what's cool is you'll tell the story, and then you'll let her answer the question as well. So it's kind of like a two-way street there. But that's another way of grabbing her attention, is like, if you have a crazy story, what you can do is just ask this question that pertains to your story, kind of gets her like interested because she's thinking about it herself, and she's like, oh, he has an answer to this. He's got a story. And then she listens. So the next part that you need to learn is about details, okay? So whatever story it is that you have in your life, and I'll go over in a little bit kind of what stories are interesting to tell in general, but just for now, bear with me. Whatever stories that you're going to tell, okay, this is part of the formula. You gotta make sure that everything has very specific detail. This is gonna be something you'll have to practice a little bit, but what you wanna make sure you're doing is telling every story in as great detail as possible. And what's gonna happen is you might stay away from that. A lot of guys, they end up staying away from doing that because they think that they're, rambling on too much. They think it's overkill, but not a lot of people have trained themselves to speak in details and speak specifically. But that is the key to telling a great story. Okay, so what are you talking about specifically? Like, what are the details of this story? Well, I want you to paint the person a picture of what's going on, right? You know the story yourself, whatever it is. I'll just make up one right now. Let's just say you went swimming with sharks. Okay, that was a story, right? That's one crazy thing that you've done before. Well, you know what it's like. You went there, you felt it, you saw it, you know what it's all like. So to you, it's a little bit more of a crazier story. So when you tell it, you might be telling it in a way that's not as detailed because you've already filled in the details. But you got to remember that the girl that you're talking to, the person that you're talking to, they don't have as much details. All they have to go off of is what you're saying, right? So for example, I could tell you a story about a shark, going and swimming with sharks, which I've never done before, by the way. So I'm just making this up on the spot. But you can say, oh, I was in I was in the Caribbean, and there was this option to go and swim with sharks, and it was crazy. I went on this boat in the middle of the ocean, and all of a sudden we dive in, and I saw a bunch of sharks. Now, okay, that story is like, okay, not really, right? But what would be better? Okay, here's a little bit better version of that with better details, okay? You could say, all right, so I was in the Caribbean, and the reason why I was there is because I was on vacation with my family. We go every single year. And what happened was when we were there, we saw these guys, like selling some cool experience, like walking on the street, and they're like, hey, we're selling, swim with the sharks. And I was like, whoa, this sounds awesome. So they take us and we go on this drive on this really like crazy, bumpy, rocky road. I had no idea where we were going. It was totally in the middle of nowhere, but then we ended up at this little lagoon that was bluer than the sky. And I'm telling you, it was the most gorgeous sight I ever saw. It was like the perfect weather too. It was like maybe 80 degrees outside, and this big blue lagoon was just sparkling. I couldn't wait to hop in and see these crazy sharks. And so we ended up going on this boat, and we, went a little bit into the lagoon, so we didn't have to swim that far. And once we got out there, I put on, this diving clothes, and I put on these little, flip-flops, and we get into the water, and I'm just sitting there waiting, and I didn't see any sharks yet. I just saw these kind of orange tropical fish kind of just like, swim by. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this big shark just comes darting past me. Okay, so that was me kind of giving you an example of how you can tell a story in more detail. And even that, you could probably do better, but bear with me, it was just kind of an example for now. But you see the difference between that one and the first one. Just way more detail. So people are like envisioning what's going on. That's why stories, that are written long ago, that are like some of the best stories ever written in, even today, they're really painting the picture for you, because it's not a movie, right? You're just reading something, and in this case, you're just hearing someone speak. So paint the picture for them in any story that you tell, okay? Now the next one is emotions. Okay, so that's another element of storytelling that you need to put in. A lot of people don't put any emotions in. So for example, I don't know if you noticed this, but the second version of the shark story I just told, I made sure not to put any emotions in it, okay? Just so you can see what it's like to hear a story with emotions and without emotions, okay? So you want to make sure that you have put in this story how you're feeling, and maybe how people were feeling around you. But the way you feel is going to be really crucial to the story, because when you're telling a story, people empathize with you. They feel your feelings. They relate to you. So if they hear that you felt an emotion, they're going to be able to relate and then be able to understand the story better and really picture themselves in the story like they're watching a movie. And it also grabs their attention more, because emotions are what make a story interesting and captivating and make them just keep flowing and make you want to listen more and more and more, right? That's why some of the best movies of all time are all about, relationships and emotions and fear and excitement and this and that and danger and all that stuff, right? That's the kind of movies you want to watch. Those are the stories that are really some of the best. I'm going to give you a little example here, like the shark story. Let's tell it again. I'm probably going to tell it a little bit differently than I did the last time in terms of the details, but I'm just going to add in this element of emotion, okay? That's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to add in this element of emotion. My family goes on this vacation every year, and I get so excited to go, because it's like this one time of the year that I get to do crazy stuff with my family, and we go somewhere all over the world, right? And so this year we went to the Caribbean, and I was just so pumped up. So we get there, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of the things that we could do there, they just didn't seem interesting. I've been scuba diving before and I've been snorkeling before, but what really caught my eye were these guys selling, and this is like on the street. It was just like, walking through the streets of the town, and these guys were selling swimming with the sharks. And I'll be honest with you, this actually totally freaked me out at first, right? Like I'm not super freaked out of sharks, but I'm thinking like, is this safe? Like, is this going to be crazy? even though I was so just like kind of freaked out about it, I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like, let's do it. So me and my family, we signed up for it. And, we're with these guys who are, driving us along in this, whatever, this car that we're driving on this crazy road. And I'm starting to get a little freaked out. Like, where are these guys taking us? Should we have signed up for this? Like, what's going on? Like, are we really going to be swimming with the sharks? Are they going to take us and murder us and rob us somewhere? Like, what the heck did we just do? But we're going along. And then all of a sudden they tell us to get out of the car. And we walk through like a forest for a second. And all of a sudden we just land on this beautiful blue lagoon. And I almost gasped. I was like, like, whoa, like this was just absolutely beautiful. When you see a sight like that, there's something about it that just totally mesmerizes you, right? And at this point, I was just so excited. All the fear just completely washed away from me. So we get in this boat and, we're going in the lagoon a little bit, a little offshore. And all of a sudden, the guy's like, all right, put on your stuff. Like, we're going in there. I'm like, that's it? Like, no prep, no talk? Like, are these sharks going to eat us? Like, what the hell's going to happen? So we put on our stuff. I jump in the water. And all of a sudden, it just goes silent. If you've ever been underwater, it's like you can't hear anything. All I hear is the little bubbles coming from my mouth. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this big shark just zooms right past me. And I felt this rush all throughout my body. And I was like, holy shit, this is crazy, right? Okay, so there you go. That's just a quick example of how to add emotion into a story. Now, maybe I went a little bit overkill with the details and the emotion. It might seem to you like this seems way too fabricated. I just wanted to overdo it a little bit so you can get a good idea of what I mean by adding in emotions and details. So that's pretty much the story formula. An attention grabber, lots of details, and adding in emotions, right? I told you it wasn't going to be that hard. If you just use those three things, just those three when telling your story, then you're going to be much more captivating and much more interesting. Those are the elements that get people sucked in to what you have to say. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so what stories do I tell? Like, what am I going to be really talking about? Well, here's the cool thing. You don't need these crazy stories of your lifetime. Maybe you haven't been swimming with the sharks. Maybe you haven't done much traveling. Maybe there's not a lot that seems to you like a big story. But you'd be surprised that taking any kind of experience you've ever had, even if it's not crazy, like I said, and just adding in those elements of details and emotions and starting off with that attention grabber, that sometimes is enough to bring even the smallest story to life, okay? So it doesn't matter if you tell a story of you, I don't know, getting a good grade when you were in high school, maybe you passed a crazy test exam, you stayed up all night for it, right? And that's probably a boring story, but if you give the details of why it was important or why you felt the way you did, well, then it's going to make the story much more interesting. So I want you to think about what are some of the stories of your life, okay? What are some of the things that have happened to you? Even if it's a little bit interesting to you, just go back and think about your life. Even if it's like a small bit interesting to you, you can use the formula to make it super interesting to the person that you're talking to. A big change, a big move, getting a new job, having an epiphany, maybe you did some kind of crazy sport and you broke your arm or something like that. Any kind of story like that, okay? Anything that's going on in your life. There's more to storytelling in terms of, when you're talking to a girl and you're in conversation. You're not going to just be telling stories the whole time, right? I'm very aware of that. You're not going to be just sitting there telling stories over and over, like, oh, this one time and this one time. You might do it like once or twice when you're talking to a girl. However, you will be talking about other things, right? You might be talking about what you do for a living. You might be talking about stuff that you're interested in. You might be talking about things that have to do with you that don't necessarily pertain to telling a story with an attention grabber and all that stuff, okay? However, anything that you're saying, you can use this story formula that I was talking about. Anything you're talking about, whatever it is, even something like she asks you what you're up to or what you've been doing today or what's been going on. As long as you use the details, right? Being very specific in terms of what you're doing, and you're using emotions, how you're feeling, okay? If you just add those two things in, then anything you talk about is gonna be more interesting than if you just told it in a very normal way. All right, here's what I want you to do. Write down below in the comments one of your stories. I want everyone to be able to help each other out here. Now, you don't have to go into detail and write a whole long story, but just think of maybe a sentence or two of a story that you have so people can read those and get an idea of the stories that they can tell. Go ahead, write that below right now, and go ahead and like the video. I'll see you on the next one. Hopefully, I'll be a little warmer.